Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for something pretty strange.
Oh yeah, this one's out there.
So today we're going deep on insectoids.
You know those kind of creepy bug-like creatures you see in sci-fi?
Right, exactly. But here's the twist. We're not looking at movies or books this time.
Nope. We've got something way more interesting. Our sources this time are interviews done under regressive hypnosis.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we're talking uh, past lives, maybe?
Yeah,
Subconscious memories?
exactly. It's like going on an inner journey, and for these folks, it led them right to insectoids.
Okay, so before we get too far, let's remind everyone that we're not presenting this as like, you know, proven fact.
Right, we're exploring these stories as unique perspectives. Like, think of them as symbolic, maybe.
Right, and who knows, maybe these stories tell us more about like our own fears and desires than about, actual bug-eyed aliens.
Yeah, I mean, who knows, right? All right, well, let's jump in. So right away, we've got some different origin stories. One source claims that insectoids came from an etheric energy space and evolved through uh, DNA manipulation.
Etheric energy space.
Yeah, it sounds like pretty out there.
It does sound like something from like a mystical text or something.
Yeah.
What if it's like a metaphor though? Like what if it represents the subconscious? You know, that place where fears and desires are formed?
Ooh, that's good. So then we have another source that says insectoids are this artificial energy form, like they were brought here as part of some experiment.
Oh, so like a kind of like a classic sci-fi trope.
Totally.
Yeah.
Advanced beings messing with us.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if we're all just pawns in some cosmic game.
Right. Okay, so get ready for source three because it says that insectoids got here through a portal from another galaxy. And get this, they're constantly mixing their DNA with other species. Like it's how they evolve.
So they're like always trying to improve themselves.
Sounds like it, yeah.
It's almost like it's like our human drive to explore and push boundaries, but like taken to the extreme.
So let's talk about what they look like.
Okay, so we're getting into the physical description.
Right, because the descriptions are all over the place. One minute they're like these big goblin-like creatures, and they're small and hard to see.
Maybe that's intentional, though. Like maybe their appearance depends on how we perceive them, or
Yeah.
even how they want to appear to us.
Ooh, that's interesting. So then there's a source that focuses more on like their energy and how they're organized. They describe insectoids as having a queen figure and like a hive mind structure, like ants.
Yeah, that hive mind thing is, it's a bit unsettling. Like what happens to free will in a society where everyone is connected?
Okay, but for the most vivid description, we got to go to source three. It says they're strong, they walk on two legs, they have these long heads, big hands with three fingers. They actually sound a lot like the creature from the movie Predator.
Wow, so like a very specific look.
Totally. And it even says that they get bigger and more complex as they integrate more DNA from other species.
That's wild. It's interesting how these descriptions are so different. Some are vague and symbolic, and some are really, really specific. Like they're each looking at it from a completely different angle.
Okay, so let's talk about these different like races or subspecies of insectoids that the sources talk about. One source describes three distinct types with their own unique behaviors.
Okay.
Then another one uses these metaphors to describe insectoid energy, so like beetles, mosquitoes, cockroaches, and fleas.
Wait, so like each insect represents a different type of insectoid energy.
Right, exactly. And it also describes how they interact with human emotions.
Okay, now that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah. And then source three goes all out and says there are over 20 distinct races.
Wow, over 20.
And it gets kind of dark because apparently they're aggressive and cannibalistic, and this is what helps them to evolve.
Oh, wow.
Oh, and it even says that they have a planet with jungles and mountains that are red. Like, wow.
It's interesting though, because what if each of these races represents like a different facet of human consciousness? Like those darker impulses we try to repress.
Okay, so this next part gets a little weird. Let's talk about food. One source says that they mostly eat protein, especially insects and larvae.
Okay, that makes sense. Bugs eating bugs.
Right. But then it says they develop a taste for decaying matter.
Oh, ew.
I know, right? And they even have these like restaurants that serve up these disturbing delicacies like
Okay, that's really tapping into like our primal fears.
yeah, for sure. So then source 2 says that they actually feed on human energy, specifically emotions like fear, anxiety, and like internal conflict.
Interesting.
And get this, it says that there are agreements made like at a soul level that let them access our energy.
Soul contracts.
Yeah.
So we're like agreeing to be their food.
That's what it sounds like.
Wow. Okay.
And it gets creepier. Source 3 claims that some insectoids get their power from this substance that living beings produce during moments of intense fear or terror. Oh, that's terrifying. It's like our fear is literally giving them power.
Right. And then this same source says that they're also driven to get human genetic material, which leads to abductions.
Okay, yeah, abductions, that's a classic.
Okay, so let's change gears and talk about how they communicate, because the sources describe this in some pretty interesting ways too. One source mentions telepathic communication and a writing system that uses symbols, kind of like alien messages. Oh, and it also mentions that they have really advanced technology like quantum computers.
Right. So like instant communication. Makes sense if they have that hive mind thing going on.
Totally, yeah. Then there's another source that's consistent with the whole energy feeding thing. It says they mostly communicate through energy so they can read and influence human emotions, and their tech is all focused on manipulating energy and connecting to humans.
So if they can feed on our emotions and manipulate them, that's kind of disturbing, right?
Yeah, it's a bit unsettling to think about. Now, source 3 describes a more basic communication system that uses sounds and vibrations, kind of like insects. Oh, interesting.
But they also have advanced technology like virtual computers, and their writing looks like Chinese characters or Morse code.
Huh. Okay, so maybe they have both. Like, maybe they have the advanced telepathic side, A&D, the primal insect side.
Okay, so remember that thing we talked about earlier from Source 3? That story about the crashed insectoid spacecraft in the 1950s?
Oh, yeah, the one with the government negotiations. That always seemed pretty far-fetched to me.
Right. Well, according to this source, they captured one of the insectoids, and it looked just like that predator creature we talked about earlier. And apparently there were actual talks between them and human governments.
Wow, okay, so what did they talk about? Like, what would we even have to offer a species that can travel through portals and, do all this stuff?
That's what we're going to talk about next. We're going to go deep on what this agreement between humans and insectoids supposedly involved and what it could mean for us.
I'm ready. Let's do it. It's like straight out of some sci-fi thriller, secret meetings, alien deals. Kind of makes you wonder what those in charge were thinking.
Right, like what could they possibly offer a species that can, travel through portals and manipulate energy?
Yeah, it really makes you wonder if, like, some of the big technological jumps we've seen lately are because of this agreement. Like, what if we've had access to knowledge from a civilization that's way ahead of us?
So according to this source, the agreement was that humans would give them access to our genetic material, and in return, they would give us advanced tech.
Wow, that's a big trade.
It is, right? Like, talk about a risky deal.
Yeah, it makes you think about, like, the long-term consequences.
And it gets worse. The source says that the insectoids actually wanted to, set up colonies here on Earth.
Whoa, hold on. So they wanted to live among us.
Yeah, but thankfully, their request was denied.
Okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
But now we have this unsettling thought that we might be living in a world where these secret deals with insectoids are happening and we don't even know about it.
That's a lot to think about. When we look at all these sources together, it paints a pretty complex picture of the insectoid presence here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does. But we have to remember that we're looking at these as symbolic narratives,
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe they're just reflections of our own subconscious fears and desires.
Okay, so let's try to break this down a bit. We've got all these different races of insectoids with their own characteristics and ways of interacting with us.
Right. And their eating habits are pretty disturbing. I mean, we've got everything from decaying matter to, that substance released during moments of terror.
Oh, and then there's the whole thing about agreements with the government where they're trading technology for access to our DNA.
Yeah. And let's not forget about those different origin stories. Like, are they from an etheric realm or did they come through a portal?
Right. It's a lot to wrap your head around, but we're not trying to say that this is all literally true. We're just using these sources as a way to look into the subconscious mind.
And those metaphors we talked about earlier with the different insects representing different things?
Yeah.
What if those are really just like different aspects of our inner world? Like the challenges we face, the choices we make.
So what do you think? What stands out to you the most from all of this?
I think what really gets me is that idea of these soul contracts. Like we're giving them permission to take our energy. It makes you wonder if we're really in control of our choices.
And it makes me think about those descriptions of them feeding on fear and anxiety. Like, what if when we're radiating those emotions, we're attracting those energies? Whether they're actual beings or just symbolic representations?
Right. And that connects to those descriptions of energy manipulation and telepathic influence.
Yeah.
What if we're all way more connected than we realize?
Mhm.
And our thoughts and emotions have this huge impact that we're not even aware of.
It's a really interesting thought. In a way, what if these insectoids are actually like mirrors, showing us the parts of ourselves that we don't want to see?
Whoa, yeah. What if instead of being afraid of them, we should be looking at them as teachers? Like they're showing us where we need to grow.
And maybe if we face those shadows, we can take back our power and create a better reality for ourselves and for the world.
That's a powerful idea. And it brings us back to that theme of transformation, which keeps coming up in these sources. You know, they're constantly evolving and hybridizing, always trying to improve and adapt.
Right, like they're always pushing forward, even if it means doing some pretty messed up stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It makes you wonder, is this need for progress something that all intelligent life has? And if so, what are the limits? You know, how far is too far?
Those are some really big questions. It's pretty amazing that we can even ask them, that we can look at these stories and find some pretty deep insights.
Yeah, I agree. It's all about exploring the unknown,
Yeah.
right? Stepping outside our comfort zones and thinking about things that really challenge our beliefs.
And sometimes the most important discoveries happen when we're out there exploring the unknown, both about ourselves and the world around us.
Absolutely.
So, what if these insectoid beings, whether they're real or symbolic, are actually here to help us evolve? Like, what if they're pushing us to face our fears, expand our consciousness, and reach our full potential?
Now, that's a really interesting thought. What if instead of seeing them as the enemy, they're actually our teachers, helping us to transform and discover who we really are?
It's a pretty big shift in perspective, but, sometimes the most important truths are hidden in the most unexpected places.
Yeah, and sometimes the things that scare us the most are actually the keys to our freedom.
So let's leave everyone with this thought. What if these insectoids are actually an invitation? Like an invitation to explore your own consciousness, face your shadow self, and embrace the unknown.
It's a journey that takes courage, an open mind, and a willingness to question everything you thought you knew. But like we've seen today, the rewards can be life-changing.
And, even if you don't believe in the whole insectoid thing, these sources are still a really interesting way to think about things.
Oh, for sure. It's all about what speaks to you, what makes you curious, and what you can learn from these different perspectives.
So what are some practical things we can do to start exploring these ideas? How can we use what we've learned about insectoids in our everyday lives?
Well, one thing you could do is start paying attention to how you're feeling. If you're feeling drained or anxious or scared, ask yourself, what's causing this? Is it a real threat, or is it something inside of me that needs attention?
That's a good point. It's like those descriptions of them feeding on fear and negative energy.
Mhm.
If we can figure out how to manage those emotions and cultivate more positive energy, maybe we can make ourselves less attractive to those things.
Yeah, exactly. And if your fears are coming from something real, then use that energy to do something about it. Protect yourself, set boundaries. We can actually learn a lot from these insectoids about resilience and adaptation and survival.
Right. Like they're not just sitting around waiting to be taken over. They're constantly evolving and changing and finding ways to thrive in their environment.
And that's something we can all do. We can learn to embrace change, be more adaptable, and become more resilient.
Mhm.
It's all about finding that inner strength and realizing that you have the power to create your own reality.
But what about those darker parts of the insectoid stories? Like the aggression and the manipulation and the desire to use other beings. How do we deal with those parts of ourselves?
That's where it gets tricky, right?
Yeah, it is.
That's where being really honest with yourself comes in.
Yeah.
Look at yourself and be honest about how you try to manipulate things or, how you want power and control. But it's not about like pretending those parts of yourself don't exist. It's more about acknowledging them and seeing where they're coming from.
So like figuring out how to use that energy in a way that's not harmful.
Exactly. It's like all those different insectoid races that we were talking about. Each one represents a different part of us. And we all have those parts in us. The beetles, the mosquitoes, the cockroaches, the fleas. It's about bringing all those parts together, like finding a balance so things can work smoothly.
So it's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah, you got it.
Hmm.
It's not about reaching some perfect state,
Yeah.
but always working on yourself, becoming more aware, more compassionate, reaching your full potential.
Wow. So this deep dive into insectoids has really taken us on a journey.
Hasn't it?
We've gone through these wild stories, thought about what they could mean, and I think we've learned a lot about ourselves, and you know what reality is all about.
I think so too. And I want to encourage everyone to keep thinking about this. You know, go back to those sources we talked about. Think about the symbols and metaphors and see what speaks to you.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to ask the big questions. Question everything. It's in those unknown places that we find the most important truths.
Exactly. And remember, this is just the beginning. The real adventure starts when you explore your own inner world, when you discover all the amazing things you're capable of, when you realize you have the power to create your own life.
You know, so keep that mind open, stay curious, and keep on exploring.
And until next time.
See you all next time.